I'm Adam, by the way.
Adam, it's really
yeah,
nice to
nice
meet you,
to
man.
meet you too, Tom. It's a real pleasure. I've actually have a list. I'm not kidding. I have a list of people that I want to bring on and to the podcast I do, and I've ticked a few off, but you've been on there since I started.
Well, good.
Yeah, because it's sort of it works on the show that I do works on a few different levels. It works as hopefully first and foremost like an entertaining conversations that people enjoy just listening to.
Right.
It works as an industry inside kind of thing because I do get into to some degree inside baseball. We talk about.
So it's specifically about film.
Yeah,
great,
exactly. So I hope that it sort of as a side effect or a result, it also acts as like a masterclass overall. First, like somebody getting into film might listen to it and learn a lot by all the different people that talk about their experiences and things like that. So that's where it came from. And given that you came up as a filmmaker in that generation that were really groundbreaking at the time, you guys were in that. The 90s, early 90s, late 80s.
Yeah, even a little earlier than that. I mean, but no, you're right.
Not to say you weren't around, but it just
Jarmusch is, absolutely, listen, it's always kind of interesting to pinpoint where the seismic event started.
Yeah.
But certainly Stranger Than Paradise was a seismic event.
Right.
And the reason for that, I think, was that for the first time, a kind of personal, non-industry film found an audience. And not only did it find an audience, it made money. And it was, it was critically acclaimed around the world. Well, this was unheard of. Now, before that, as a young film student at NYU in 1976 through 79, it blew my mind to see guys like Eric Mitchell. Remember Eric Mitchell?
No.
He was
just going to be honest. I'm not going to
pretend.
pretend.
Eric Mitchell, John Lurie. Remember John Lurie?
Yes, of course.
Amos Poe.
Sure.
And to some degree, in his own outside orbit from all of that, was John Waters. Okay?
Right.
Now, John Waters was making independent film before there was even a term for it. But these guys kind of paved the way. Eric Mitchell and John Lurie made a bunch of Super 8mm films in New York City and projected them in bars and lounges. And it was kind of the real birth of this idea for the real New York independent idea. And Beth and Scott B., I don't know if you remember those.
Yes, of course. Sure.
Well, they took it one step further. They had, I think, the first film in the New York Film Festival. And it was incredibly exciting, Adam, to see people my own age, people with ideas similar to mine, people with no money, making films that ended up on screens. And I mean, that's another whole story, is somehow getting a film on a screen. But back then, that's all anybody knew about.
Yeah.
Was, you're going to get on a screen.
Right.
And just the sense of camaraderie was amazing. And I'm not kidding. For a brief period of about 5 years, there really was this feeling that it was a community.
Sure.
I've never experienced anything quite like it.
Well, just as a young film goer at the time, there's an excited fan. Anecdote I love telling just about Stranger Than Paradise, since you brought it up, is I was living in Boston at the time, and I was planning to go to, it was in the Back Bay somewhere, and I was planning to go in our house, I was planning to go into the Alan Rudolph film. Choose Me, I think was the film. Mm-hmm. It was 85, I think it was, or 84. I misread my ticket. I walked into a different theater, not knowing, sat down, and it was like these short little scenes in black and white, and then they would just fade to, fade to black, and then it would pick up. I'm like, what the hell is this? But I love this.
That's great.
And
that's amazing.
Knew I missed the credits, so I didn't know. But at a certain point, I figured this is not the movie I went into. Right. But I stayed and never got around to seeing Choose Me. But I went back to every Jim Jarmusch movie thereafter.
Good.
It was and it changed my life in a way, because I think that and a select few other films really, had an incredible impact. Mm-hmm. And I got really into independent film because there was so much incredible stuff, and it was at a time where just everything seemed to be exciting to watch. And living in Oblivion was right there, But I wanted to say that the way you talked about your experience going back even right before that period where you were projecting in bar, there was no language, there was no infrastructure for what you guys were doing.
Nothing. There was
no roadmap.
No, it was I don't see it as a wasteland, because a wasteland means that there's nothing growing there whatsoever. But it was a foreign land.
Right. Nobody
knew anything.
You didn't know how to plant seeds in the soil,
and also the philosophy, the mindset was really still pretty stridently pro Hollywood. I remember I had serious fights at school with the faculty, telling what they felt was the right way and the wrong way to make a film. And I said, listen, this is a film school. It's a school. You can't tell people what's right and wrong. It's like, and it was all about the conventional Hollywood plot point A, plot point B. And I remember, even after I had written the script for Johnny Suede, which was 8 years after I finished film school, I had a critic from these visiting critics at the Sundance Lab. The film went to the Sundance Lab. One guy says to me, I don't know, man. He's this old guy, He said, I don't get this script, man. I don't know where your plot point B comes in. I just can't find it. I said, that's because I don't have any, man. I don't have any. I don't even know what you're talking about.
Right. And you weren't being rebellious necessarily. I mean, by your own standards. And I want to set the record straight. After seeing Living in Oblivion, which I think was my introduction, I went back and watched Johnny Suede. So, but
well, a lot of people think Living in Oblivion was my first film.
The way they think Stranger Than Paradise was Jim's first film,
right?
Which is his third, I think, or second.
Yeah, second.
Right. And that is your new film, which is Down in Shadowland,
right?
Which actually felt to me like, even though I'm sure it's part of an evolution and a growth process, but it also does feel in some very ways like getting back to an emotionally centered place for you, or a very authentic place is the best way I can put it.
Right. I think that's a very well observed statement, Adam. When I introduced the film last night, I didn't know what I was going to say, because it's an odd movie. It's a strange film, and especially now, today.
Well, in the context of what you've made, one might say that, but I don't think...
Yeah, but I think, okay, I'm glad you say that, but in terms of what people expect, like even in a straight documentary, it's not a straight documentary. And to some degree, it's not really even about the subway. To some degree.
Right.
Anyway, what I had said was, making an independent film, there is an incredible lag time between your cinematic impulse, sometimes even your visual impulse, and when you actually get to pick up a camera and attempt to get that, to either recreate it or discover it on the set. And I just, I found it's been I'm just so tired of waiting for someone to say to me, yeah, go ahead, or, here's the money, or an actor to say, yeah, I'll be in your movie. And I just said, fuck it.
Yeah.
Bought this little camera and reconnected with this idea of that if I see something, at least try to get back to just that connection between seeing it and it's not so much recording it. It's because that makes it sound like I'm a yeah. It makes it sound like I'm some sort of archivist, and that's not it. It's like, it's when you see something rare like that, some of these moments of people, this incredibly delicate human interaction when you see on the subway, and to try to capture that and as spontaneously as possible, and then again to do it without anybody telling me what to do, without anybody saying you can't do that, or I just wanted to make a movie for myself.
Right. This one's for me, but then of course it's for everybody because you're putting it out there, and also I think people that care about your films and what you're doing and what you've been doing are going to be curious about it, because this is obviously, you took the time and I don't want to exploit what happened last night, but you got emotional.
Yeah. Were you there last night?
Yes, I was.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You should have told me. I wouldn't have gone through that whole story.
Yes, it was. And in fact, I asked that last question, which was basically saying, well, do you see a through line?
That was you who asked.
Yeah. But you were, as you say, it was a blur. Of course it was. But you did get emotional, which was really touching. But But I'm wondering if you had overnight to kind of figure out what you were feeling, because obviously you didn't see that coming. And it would be easy to say after seeing the film, I'm sorry, that this is also about children on some level too. There's this thread to it about violence and children. I wonder if you had time to process your thoughts about it.
I have. The crazy thing is that this isn't the first time it's happened. And it's incredibly alarming at times because there's this just incredible swell of emotion, and I feel honestly at those times that I will collapse in a puddle of tears, and and then so that I know that I'm in front of a group of people, and I have to
keep it together,
get my shit together, and so the energy goes into, all right, Tom, come on. But it's about a lot. There's just so much going on in my life right now that is how can I say, it's difficult. It's like I'm dealing with still trying to adjust to this massive shift in the independent film
landscape.
It just doesn't exist anymore, and so I'm struggling every day to try to get a film made, and some familial stuff. It just it's a. And even this film in itself, the fact that I kind of myself went underground for 5 years.
Yeah,
I did, and so it's a little odd sometimes coming up out of there.
Right. I can only imagine as you stood up to introduce your film, that the experience brought you back to doing that many times in the past. In different places.
Right. Yes.
That occurs to me if I put myself in your shoes, and that can be a very emotional.
Yes, that was part of it. It was also part of it was whether I was ready or not emotionally to present this film to the public. I mean, in some ways, maybe the film is better just shown by itself, because the film goes deep for me. I mean. And it was an immensely positive experience. I don't want to turn it into a sob fest, but because I think there's actually some funny stuff in the movie too. Not all of it, but I guess it's this feeling that I have of just how difficult it is to make a film, and what a miracle it is on any level to get a film made. And I guess I've been struggling with that my whole career, which is. None of the films have been easy to make. In fact, the easiest film to make was Living in Oblivion, because it was a group of us who just got together, and
it was a little renegade or what have you.
And we financed it ourselves. So it was. I felt better. It was a very intense experience for me watching the film as well, because that's the first time I'd seen it in an audience.
All right.
Yeah. But then I felt better afterwards. I felt like, what, Tom, just you can do this. Just answer the questions.
Yeah, and it was it was nice. It was people responded to it, and
what do you think? Do you think they got it? Do you think people understood what I was after?
I think so. I mean, it seems like I thought they were fairly astute. I mean, questions anyway. I mean, it seemed like people really. Sometimes it's just the caring to ask the questions, even if they're not always articulated or thought through. I mean, that's the problem inherently with a Q&A, right? Isn't it, Tom?
Yeah.
That, I mean, I haven't processed your film, but I'm going to start. This is why I honestly.
You're absolutely right.
I don't like it. I used to do it, and then I'm like, I don't have a question. I'm just hearing myself talk.
You are absolutely right.
Yeah.
You know what, tell you something? Every Q&A I've ever sat in as an audience member, I've never asked a question. Because you're absolutely right. It takes time to process a film. I mean, I've sat with this film for 5 years, and I still can't process it.
Yeah.
How's an audience going to?
Right.
But in light of that, I do think some of the questions were very specific and showed there was some emotional connection to the film. So,
it's interesting as you were describing the disappointments, and I know it doesn't describe the experience of filmmaking in the 90s and 2000s and in a complete way, but there's a disappointment. It seemed like it should get easier, not harder. And it almost occurs to me, geez, you should have sold out and just gone Hollywood years ago when you probably had the opportunity, because, why should you be struggling at this point? Where it's not really what I would have wanted you to do, of course, but as a fan of your films, but I would have understood it, given how exasperating it's like you give to the film culture and you're not getting back. Maybe it feels that way as you're.
It's not so much I'm not getting back. I mean, because listen, let's face it. It's a complicated issue. But what I was going to say is that it's a business about money, and it actually is. Even the independent business now is about money.
Of course.
But it didn't used to be.
Right.
In other words, for example, Stranger Than Paradise broke the mold, and I believe made as a gross around the world in that year $2 million.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. A couple years later, Pulp Fiction comes out, which essentially was still called an independent film.
Yeah.
And grossed $500 million.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole landscape just changed.
It really did. That was the jaws of the independent film world, wasn't it? Yeah.
It was. Now, I got nothing against that. I'm just saying, what kind of stories can you tell in which, the expectation is that you make $500 million every time?
Right.
I can't do that. I'm not really interested in that. And but let's, listen, it's changing. It's certainly changing. What it's going to change into, I don't know. I just think about the kind of films that turned me on, at that time. For me, in New York, it was the early films of Herzog.
Mm-hmm.
It was vendors making interesting films.
Mm-hmm. Everybody kind of nods to her at some point or other to John Cassavetes.
Cassavetes, I wasn't such a
not
huge.
as much.
I
Okay.
wasn't. I just wasn't. I mean, I respect him. I found that his movies always for me are just a little shrill. That's just my taste. That's just my taste. In other words,
they can be. I guess you're right.
But that's just my taste. I prefer.
Right.
Oh, there were some just amazing films that were made in that period, and stories that I have to tell you, there's a sensibility that kind of exists today in independent cinema that feels like coffee table, filmmaking.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it feels like to me.
Mm-hmm.
You pick up a magazine on a coffee table, you put it down, and you forget about it. I'm not interested in that. I'm not, and what can I tell you?
So you're in this other phase, or I shouldn't say that. I mean, I don't know. Have you even thought it through, like to know what you're doing after?
It's a good question, Adam.
I want to put you on the spot.
At some point, one would think I would really try to think it through, and I have.
Yeah.
I've written a script that still makes me feel very strongly that I'm keeping my integrity. Right. And I went back to some of these really inspirational films for me years and years ago, like The Asphalt Jungle.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever see that movie?
Yes.
I mean, it's an incredible film, and just even in its sensibility, this group of people, and then the most likable guy in the film, played by Sterling Hayden, right, gets shot in the stomach and dies, and he starts to die halfway through the film.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's as existential, I think, as anything Bergman ever tried to do in its own way.
Right.
But still, it works as a crime movie. And so I wrote something like that, contemporary kind of a crime with a sexually complex undertone. Mm-hmm. And that's what I'm trying to make right now. I think that it could find a place in the market. But, God, the struggle to get an actor attached to it, which would then it's maddening. So that's why, I keep just, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, Adam. I would, if I did, I would tell you.
Thanks. Do you feel like your peers are in the same space?
I think so. Jim is in a good position where he's got a strong base to work from of films that have been successful to a certain degree. I spoke to him recently, and he said he's frustrated a little bit because he's got a film that he wants to make for $5 million, and he's getting the same requirement thing.
Oh, I see. He had Cumberbatch in it?
I can't remember.
Who was in the Only Lovers Left Alive? Was Tilda Swinton?
Tilda Swinton and somebody else, but I can't remember the guy's name.
Oh, no. I'm sorry. Thomas, Hiddleston.
Uh-huh.
I think that's the British actor, Thomas Hiddleston. Yeah.
But I'm trying to think of that group of people. I don't know what I think. Alexander Rockwell is like teaching.
Yeah, he did this. What a lovely guy. Very. He has also kind of, I have to say, did a similar, very personal. Some would want to call it a step back. It's not necessarily a step back. It's maybe getting back to basics on some level. He did called Little Feet about it with his kids.
Right.
Did you hear about it?
I haven't heard about that.
It's a really touching film as well. And very kind of what some people would call experimental. I hate kind of categorizing so much.
I know,
but we're all fall into that.
Well, it's
hole because
it's the world right now.
Yeah.
It's like it's what I'm trying to say. And God damn it, I don't want to sound like I'm complaining, and I don't want to sound like I'm a fucking dinosaur and I'm a cranky old fart. I'm not saying that. I saw the documentary about Vietnam. Have you seen that one?
Last Days in Vietnam.
It's an incredible film.
It is great.
It's an amazing
all archive.
This Rory, right?
Rory Kennedy. Yeah.
She literally creates this moment of suspense as you don't know what is going to happen.
Which is kind of odd since it already did.
So
right?
that was
you're right.
That was amazingly inspiring. The documentary about Nick Cave, which wasn't really a documentary, but
right, 20,000. Let's do the math here. It has to be 20,000 days on Earth.
Days, something like that. I thought that was a very inspiring film.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of, you're right. I mean, both of those seem to be taking documentary out of the. Playing with the form. Let's put it that way. Which I would say, I wanted to recommend if you haven't seen it, Manny Kirshner's film Stations of the Elevated.
Oh, I see it's playing in New York.
It's at BAM right now,
right.
Which is kind of speaks to your film. There's a conversation in a way because he's also taking. Well, it's coincidentally it happens to be taking trains,
right?
Subway ride, and just no dialogue. But in that one, there's very few people. But anyway. It's mostly above ground.
Yes.
The elevated.
Yeah, that's what.
Whereas yours are underground.
Underground.
And of course, I think there's more going on there. I saw it. That's BAM Cinema Fest, which is their annual summer kind of showcase of independent films that they show. And which
is fantastic. I love that.
This is finding an audience. It's a pretty amazing time.
They're a great group.
And they are. Well, they should be very excited about Down in Shadowland.
Yeah, that would be interesting. I should definitely. I know they had a whole series about subway films.
Okay.
So, but this was the first. This was actually the world premiere of the film
here at Woodstock Film Festival.
Yes. And I was here with the film that I made about the Doors called When You're Strange, and I was just deeply impressed by the audiences here. I mean. That sensibility of kind of gutting under the political bullshit and just kind of finding that undertone of what is really commonsensical. You know what I mean by that? That, in other words, there are certain things that are non-political because you basically know them in your soul, in your heart. You know what is right and wrong. You know what I mean? Yes. I'm not talking about religion.
Yeah.
I'm just talking about as a human being. And I just felt that this would be a good place to bring this particular movie. No, Jane, it's an emotional film. It's a very emotional film.
There's your pal coming up, too. She was great,
Barbara.
by the way. She was terrific.
Yes.
I talked to her today.
Hey, Barbara.
We had
good to see you.
We had a long chat. I thought she did a tremendous job, and it's a skill set that not everybody has. Even at a festival like Woodstock, it's not easy. But I was saying the audiences here, though, they're sophisticated. I'm putting hash marks there a little bit in the sense that culture is a big priority. On the other hand, they're not insider to the degree where they're looking at it through that prism. They're looking at the film as an emotional way.
Right.
So you're actually going to get some, I think, because of the proximity to New York. I mean, this particular type of festival is unique in that way, and there aren't too many like it.
I agree with
where you get that nice. It's still the community coming out.
Yes.
But they're sophisticated and wanting to have that.
I think you're absolutely right, Adam. Yes.
But I don't mean to be snobby about it either in any way, because everybody has their thing to offer, I'm sure.
Well, you see, film, it's always been this way, too. It's like there is a good thing and a bad thing about this, but there is a sense of glamour in the film business. Now, that can be a nurturing thing, and it can be a poisonous thing. And the poisonous part of it is that people are attracted to the business because of this sense of
it's superficial.
Yes, but it goes so deep. I mean, in a way, that's a little bit what Delirious was about. You know, this sense of like, I need to be there. I need to be where that light is brighter than where it is right now. That's where I need to be. Otherwise, I'm not going to feel good about myself. I won't have any value or whatever. And in a way, film does take the human experiences and make them bigger. And that's what it does. And that's good. That's part of the glamour as well. I mean, there is nothing more powerful to me than a close-up of Elizabeth Taylor in A Place in the Sun. When you see that movie, and not only is she unbelievably beautiful, but emotionally, she explodes the frame. She commands that frame. She owns and I'm not talking about controlling it. She literally, she earns every inch of that frame by what she gives. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that kind of glamour, man, that's what we all live for in a way in this business, because it moves us. We see something we recognize because it's been exaggerated to a degree that it's us, but yet, as humans, but then it's this bizarre form of entertainment as well.
Right.
And I still firmly believe in the entertainment value of any film, and I tried to even put that in Down in Shadowland.
Yeah, no, I know you did, and I know it was important to you the way you talked about it. And so, is there a plan? Do you have a next step for Down in Shadowland? Is there?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to see if just how things sort of settle out after the screening today, and begin to investigate what are some other venues for the film.
Well, certainly a place like one that immediately comes to mind is, of course, the Anthology Film Archives.
Right. Yeah. Jed is looking at it now. So, but yeah, I mean, Film
you
Forum.
Get it to BAM too.
Film
BAM,
Forum.
Because I think
BAM,
they would like this film. I think too. Yeah. And Jake Perlin and
I mean, I could see like
an audience. Yeah,
a 5-day run or something. Something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, if we had the time, and maybe we can follow it up down when in New York at some point. I would like to talk to you about that, because I talked to about this to a lot of filmmakers and people in the industry. Does the theatrical serve every film anymore? And those types of questions.
Mm-hmm.
That's going down a rabbit hole.
Mm-hmm.
So it's okay to. But I have a question about how did the Vortex, if I think about, again, over the years, including Delirious, which you just brought up, but how did Steve Buscemi end up in the vortex of all of that? And, how did that fucker... I mean, if you look at every single film that we all, love, everybody. He worked with Spike Lee. He worked with you. He worked with Alexander. He worked with... Jarmusch, Quentin, the Coen brothers.
Right.
I don't, those are all men. I'm certain he also sure did. I don't know if he ever did an Allison Anders film or somebody, but how does somebody like that what is it? I mean,
well, that's a good question. It's a very, very good question, and you should even contemplate, writing a book about that, because when I work with Steve, I find that it's one of the most personal and intimate and enjoyable experiences that I've ever had on the set, because he's so giving as an actor. So that's on a practical level. I mean, he never shuts down on you. And if he disagrees with an idea, he will tell you. But it's never like, oh, fuck you, I'm not doing that. You can kind of see him think about it, and then he'll say, well, okay, what if we try this? Watching him improvise, seeing him improvise is like a miracle, because he can improvise in a way that brings the script sharper, brings it to life. That's one of the problems that I have with Cassavetes. The improvisation takes me away from the movie. It just goes off. When Buscemi improvises, it's all in the world of the film and the film's ideas. You understand what I'm saying? So that's for me. But then you look at his physicality. I think he's a beautiful looking guy, and in Oblivion, the scene where he kisses Catherine Keener, there's a scene where he falls in love with Catherine Keener, his leading actress in Living in Oblivion. And right before we were to shoot that scene where he kisses her, I found him backstage, back in this little area in the shadows, kind of very disturbed and almost crying. And I said, Steve, what's up? And he said, Tom, you just have to understand, this is the first time that I've ever kissed a woman in a film.
Wow.
And I just hugged him. I said, and so he brings a manic, and manic isn't quite the right word, only though, because manic sometimes implies
Roberto Benigni.
Or crazy, yes. Yes.
Yeah, I got it.
He brings this world of ideas, and for me, humor. He's the one actor that I know that whenever he's angriest as a character, he just cracks me up.
Well, I'm not here just to wax about Steve Buscemi, but in Fargo, he gets shot in the jaw.
Yeah,
and he's digging in the snow with a pick or something. It's incredibly sad.
He's so
and hysterical.
human.
Yeah, right.
He's so I've never seen him do a role where he's like this. He's saying "fuck you, fuck you." Even when he says that, particularly in Delirious, you see right through his soul, and you go, "Oh, we know the pain that he's in." I fought for 2 years to get him to be in Delirious. I wrote the script for him, and he said no.
Really?
I said, Steve, come on. And it took me almost 2 years to get him to see why I had written it for him. And I know not too many people saw that movie, but I still feel it's one of his best performances. I seriously feel there was a disservice done just by simply not acknowledging his performance.
I missed that, I guess.
You should check it out.
No, I mean his being passed over or what have you. I didn't know. Well, again, Down in Shadowland is just having its world premiere at the Woodstock Film Festival, and it's made by filmmaker Tom DiCillo, and I hope you get the other one off the ground too, and that it's not too draining an experience for you.
I think what I'm going to do.
Or you're up for it anyway.
I think what I'm going to do, Adam, if I do have any plan, the plan is sort of this. The one film of mine that kind of came into being the most, honestly, was Living in Oblivion. And I think I'm going to write something that I can actually make for maybe $500,000, or less than that. Because the Hollywood, really, the independent game right now is really the Hollywood game. Mm-hmm. There's no difference. And there's only one way around that, and that's to, cast a group of actors that are just dying to be in your movie. Mm-hmm. That's the one thing I would suggest to anybody out there that's trying to make a film. Sure, having Clive Owen in your movie, or any of these people, George Clooney even. These are all very good actors, mm-hmm. But you'd be better suited, I think, finding someone whose passion for the role is going to be with you every step of the way, because that's what you need.
Well, I did just see here. The only other movie I watched, actually, quite frankly, was Wildlike with Bruce Greenwood.
Huh.
He was terrific.
Wow.
This is a really meaty role for him as an actor. He usually plays supporting characters in a lot of things too. Mm-hmm. Although he's carried it, I'm sure. He was really great guy, great in it. Great. It was a great role.
Good.
But I want to respect your time too.
But
you can see, it's easy to talk for. Thank you, really.
My pleasure
for fitting this in on this week. And so let's try to pick it up again.
Great.
Me too. Thank you.